Hi, this is Combination, and we're back. We got Michael Moore over here to my right. We got Homer Moore over to my left. I'm Nye Gray, and our special guest is Delbert Blair. Again, you were talking about the formulation of the Earth and how they came from different parts of the universe, and we wanted you to touch a little bit more on that.
And these advanced people, again, each one trying to see what they could do to put their hand into making a planet, and were succeeding in doing so. They had formed the crust for Earth. They were also working on inside of the Earth. And then a strange thing happened, which showed that even advanced people can sometimes goof, or sometimes there are things that happen to change strategy. It is said that while they were working within the Earth itself, that the sun, the new sun, began to come forth. And they had come from worlds without sun. They used to say that they went from dark worlds, from dark matter, and they didn't need sunlight. But this planet was being made to go under a sun, and then the sun began to burst forth, supposedly in the firmament. When this happened, it frightened them to death, because they realized that as they were pure mind, they did not have to have a physical body. That the laws of the universe stated that once a sun came into being, they would be frozen or trapped within the consciousness with which they were using. And so we award this in when part of their group came in what was called the Merkaba. That when they began to see this happening, they became fearful and fled. The trouble was that they didn't flee with all of their consciousness, and part of these construction included, if you would, these light bringers were trapped inside the shell of this planet. And by the time they got to the surface, the Merkaba that had been there before had left. And this is when they knew that they were now doomed to physical reality. And it's almost like a conundrum, because physical is supposed to be the lowest vibration you can have. And the realness of it is debatable. It's how real is physical reality. But nevertheless, they would now be doomed to find out. So toward that end, there was much wailing and gnashing of teeth, because they had found out that what had happened would be to start a planet now with very advanced beings trapped inside of it, which was not meant for them to be there, but for other species to be inbreeded there, to be gestated there, and so on like that. Toward that end, it was said that these abandoned ones were called the Abanderos, and there are many books that talk about Deros, derogatory energy organized robotized organisms, and Teros, the ones that began to stay on a higher consciousness, because it is said that some of them, once this happened and they began to take form, became deranged. They were more or less so frightened of physical consciousness that they actually began to be almost like insane. So after eons of time passed, and I guess during the first eon, it was said that something must be done to right the wrongs done to Earth. And so it was decided that a special being would be sent here. And this was a being that had been bred on a distant planet and was sent here to Earth. This is where we get many times the story of Superman. And because in metaphysics, Superman exists not as one from Krypton, and not with one with a big cape and so, but they had said what they would do be to send the best being that they could find to be incubated on Earth, and to become then the god or ruler of both the Earth inside, outside, and in between, because Earth at that time was to be named terrestrials. So then there would be what they call interterrestrials, terrestrials, and extraterrestrials, those that lived inside, those that lived on the surface, and those that lived in the heavens. And toward this end, they created a being that was known as Seth. Seth's full name was Sathantis. And Sathantis had instructions there, as he was sent in a capsule, that had a special vial of energy, a special vial of liquid. And this liquid became what we now refer to as melanin. The particular gland that they put in this giant, this supposed was a 22-foot person, was what they called the pineal gland. And it was the first creation here that was made with the pineal gland and the gift of melanin, or what they call now dark matter, or the crystal of enlightenment, because the pineal gland looks like a crystal in the hypothalamus and is capable again of producing melanin. So it was said then that this was the first God-type person on Terrestrius, and this God-type person, because melanin was a dark matter, was therefore a dark-skinned person. This is where the debate comes with the first God of Earth, the first man of Earth, black or so. The first person or soul of Earth had no color. But the God that was sent to rule both the heavens, the hells, and the surface again was called Sathantis. From that time on, there's a whole story about the incubation period of that many other zoological and biological and astrological things were sent here to Earth, that this Earth has become almost like not only a prison planet later on, but a planet where many things could live. And this is why it had so many climates. It had snow, and it had desert, it had water and salt water, it had foliage, it had verdant forest, and so almost any creature could live here on Earth. The point was, again, what could be gained from Earth that would benefit the universal prime creator, and so it was decided that not only could there be a species habitat, but later on, because of the vast knowledge, other planets seemingly in our system, which had incorrigibles, which had bad guys, bad women, bad men, or had people who were not fit for they saw it, since they knew that souls could not die, they began to send them to Earth. And so this is why in many cases people say, well, Earth is almost like a prison colony. Earth is almost like a zoo. Earth is almost like a zoo, because many creatures can live here, many intelligence can live here, and it is said in the study of metaphysics that it is the only planet for a far-reaching time that has so many species. It has already supposedly 5 different races here. Metaphysics says it has 18, because it says there are 13 others, and some of them don't even look human. It said that not only that, but that the incorrigibles, or what they refer to as the laggards in many of the holy books, were sent here too. They didn't know what to do with people. They knew they couldn't kill a soul, so what do? They sent their laggards here for learning and teaching. And supposedly the great teachers and great doctors were here. So that gives you a metaphysical background on supposedly the beginning of Earth. The point is, if that is the case, what has changed on Earth? Very little has changed on Earth, other than the fact that from all of these creations and all of this milieu of what you might call genetically modified things again, Earth then became an observation place for other planets to come and see. See the crazy people, see the wonderful people, see the fallen people, see the chosen people, and begin and see, do you want your planet to ever go through this again? Well, this went on for so long, and of course I'm leaving out lots and lots and lots of history, but I'm giving you the overview as is taught in most of the metaphysical books, both the Bhagavad Gita, as it is, the Populu, some refer to as the biblical Bible again, in the Al-Quran, in the Mishnah Torah, the Mount Talmud. All of these are referenced again, and this is where you begin to talk of Enlil and Enki, but these are the times that we now are beginning to reawaken to what maybe our planet really is. And because of that, there is a reawakening now taking place. The reawakening is said that our planet, because of its long suffering, and it's said to be almost some 4.5 billion years old, has now been granted the right of dispensation. It's now been stated that she suffered enough, and it's said to be a female incarnation, and that because of this and all she's gone through, she's being given the privilege of going from the 3rd dimension to the 5th dimension. That would be equal to coming into kindergarten to 8th grade and then getting to graduate school. And all within the next 4 years. This is just starting. It's been going on. But the termination point, as was said by some, and now they refer to it as a Mayan calendar, states that the time would be December 21st, 2009. I'm sorry, 2012. But what this actually means is chronological time that we're using now, using the Julian Gregorian calendar, may count it as that. It does not have to be that time in all aspects of people who count time on Earth. Nor do we really know, as they use certain terminologies amongst the Mayan, if we're even in that right time now. This is what's debatable, because there's been many calendar changes here. In fact, the word calendar comes from kalends, which was talked about by the Council of Kalends. So whether or not it's going to be then, whether or not this is the right time, it seems to be a universal opinion now, as most people are vibing, that someplace around that time, something is happening. And as many people who view this tape can find out, time seems to be speeding by. If you're noticing now, the days go by very quickly. It's almost as you're going to sleep, you wake up and there's another day. And many people who feel this, I think, are right, because it shows that the cells of our body are beginning to respond to the energy fields of Earth. And time is speeding up. Many people can see it, most people can't, but those who do it say, what is happening with time? Well, if it's true, if that big preposition if comes into being, we are going from the 3rd to the 5th dimension, then things should be different. And if there is a quickening, then there seems to be now a deadly force in this consciousness, a deadly force in this planet, which has taken advantage of the fall of the planet, and they're called collectively Dracons, serving a group of people called the Illuminati, who don't want this great change to take place. Because since it was so stated that there was a goof by the gods at one time. This is again when they left the planet, left the derogatories, that they feel that the planet that they have since taken over, and they've been around now again, I guess for some 4,000 years, or for some say 400,000 years, that they have had their way with many of the people that live on the surface of Earth, and have even battled some of the so-called gods of the inner world. And these are now what they call these upright walking serpents that are referred to in many of the holy books. These are the ones that are called from Draconis and from Pegasus and from Orion, a whole group of people that are upright and have scales that look different from the other humans that had no scales or very little scales. And they have pretty much been the ones that have done all these horrible things that you hear about, kidnapping, abducting, and this kind of thing, and working so-called magic. And if this is the truth, then it also means that if this happens, since they were really fourth dimensional, almost like high schoolers that came back to grammar school to mess with the children in grammar school, now they would begin to get their uppance, because as the planet transits upward, and they are the fourth dimension, many people now who are advanced are beginning to operate on the same dimension that they come from. This is why they can come through walls, this is why they can do all these magical things. And many people now are beginning to see shadow people. They're beginning to get an understanding of something out of the corner of their eye, because if our cells are keeping time with the planet is going to the very dimension where our antagonists, protagonists, and devils, if you would, actually exist. This is why it's been frightening for those who astral project, or those who take drugs, and so when they have to cross through this plane to get to the higher planes, they get stuck on it, mainly because so many of them are here. And when you face the devil face to face, or meet your protagonist face to face, it's frightening. Right. But here's what happens. If this whole prophecy comes true, or the whole prediction that is analogized by the Mayan and Mayan calendar, we'll be going through that one, and by 2012, we'll be into the fifth dimension, which means that we'll be past the vibration of our protectors, and I didn't say protectors, protectors are those who have been messing with us, or those who have been bothering the people of Earth, and now we begin to be their gods. We'd be vibrating on a plane higher than they, and since they're said to be soulless and eggborns, and most eggborns they say have no souls, moonborns do, that they now are fearful with what we will do, or what those who make the ascension will do, or what the Creator will do for the transgression that they have formed before. So now they are really fighting for their very lives, because the soul is almost impossible to kill. You can capture a soul for a while if the soul vibrates low enough, but you can't destroy a soul completely because it's part of the Creator's mind, and you cannot destroy the Creator's mind. So this is where now they're putting in Custer's last stand. This is where they're now digging in for a final fight, because where they come from, they're almost unforgiving. If you watch most of these movies like Star Wars and all, Star Trek and all these things, they come from a very unforgiving race of people. If you fail, don't come back. And they can't go back to where they were. They can't stay on this planet, so they're going to dig in like a rat in a corner. You're going to see now all hell beginning to break loose, because they're now having to get themselves of a planet. They don't want to die, and they don't care anything about you or anybody else. And those that have served the devil, those who have gotten riches, those who, for a pound of cure, 1 pound of cure, they sell their soul. Right. Remember that phrase in the Bible, paraphrased again, but profit is a man or woman to gain the whole world, this little planet, and lose their interest to the cosmos, lose their own souls. So this is why things are so rough. To war that in now, they're letting off all kind of drugs, they're putting out all kind of shots, they're getting people to almost kill themselves in wars and this kind of thing. But it makes more sense if you look at it from this point of view. Now, whether or not it is believable or not, belief is a truth that you have to find within. Right. I give you some of the metaphysical books, and I've read many of them, not all, that way. Now, to continue with that same thing inside, and I don't want to stay too long on this one, but enough to give a thorough consciousness of what may be the potentials of history, that other planets also have people who live within them. And that the same thing that agrees here. If you're under a sun, there's nothing new. That's why the whole term was nothing new under a sun. Because the sun is like the light bringer. It's a gatherer, it's an incubator. And under a sun, there's only so far you can progress. So that means that all the planets in our system are still under the same sun. But when the scientists understood that a sun can cause AIDS, that a sun can cause dehydration of water to crispy on a cell itself, that sun is not the thing to be under, unless you're going to definitely have some form of melanin. And if you know, again, I want to kind of digress just a little bit there too. It's been said that those who have a pineal gland can be exposed to the sun for limited times, and the pineal gland, which is like a big crystal in the skull, takes that energy, re-radiates it at night when you go to sleep as astral light. And this is the way we charge up, get our creativity, begin to not completely disintegrate. And this is why those who can get a big charge of that can dream in color, can astral projection, and this can project and this kind of thing.
Wow.
So we say if it happens here, maybe the same thing's happening on other planets. And so we would then not look for intelligent life on the surface of a planet. We'd have to go into the planet to find intelligent life, because the intelligent life would know that their physical bodies will age, so they go inside so they can control the atmosphere better, not be exposed to meteor flows and every kind of thing, and live within safely the surface of a planet. So it's said to be the story of Mars, which is one of the so-called inhabited planets again. And if this is also the case, there's a history that teaches about Phobos and Deimos of Mars. Phobos and Deimos are said to be the two orbiting satellites of Mars, and it has been interpreted that they mean panic and fear. And so it was said, well, why would they say panic and fear are the two orbiting Martian satellites, and why would they be called that, and why are they there? That gets into another story, which is talked about in the whole series of the inner world. And that is that there was a 13th planet, and this 13th planet had a moon. So they refer to this 13th planet as Maldek. And the accompanying moon of Maldek was called Malona. And that Malonans and Maldekians got into a big battle. They both were doing research. And this is very interesting, because I'm going to take this back to what may have happened here too with our Earth. But at this time we're talking about a time maybe, I can't give a really specific time, but let's just say this happened maybe about 6 or 7 million years ago. But whichever again, this planet and its moon got into a battle using a very developed force, which they call real force in Masnak, and they began to battle each other, and they succeeded in breaking the vortex field around each planet. Now that gets into another theory, which I won't stay in too long, but that the Creator did never make a planet without a way of sustenance for that planet.
Right.
You know, here we talk about we got to get fossil fuel, as though all the elephants and all the dinosaurs died together, and we have to take that liquid and make oil out of it and fuel. That is preposterous.
Right.
Instead, that when the planet is made, it has an orbiting field called a vortex, and that the vortexes are what gives all planets stability, what gives all non-artificial moon stability, and this is why the planet always has energy. Well, they succeeded in breaking the vortex around Malona and Maldek, causing the planet to disintegrate, and many say that is what formed the asteroid belt. Arguments both pro and con. I believe the pro. But then it was also people on Mars and on Venus who understood that that's a big story too. Venus and Mars have their own history, so I'm only going to get into that as it relates to Earth. Right. That many of the scientists there and many of the philosophers and prognosticators and so prophets stated that this would happen, and that they better prepare for the time when these very backwards people and these God less fearing people would destroy their planet and their moon. So toward that end they had built spaceships. Toward that end they tried to reinforce their planet, but they still didn't know exactly when it was going to happen. But when it did happen, and this debris and all began to hurl toward it, many of the Martians had left, because they were very advanced people, and realizing what may happen, many of them left, and said that they left on ships using the Merkaba fuel and using magnetic energy, and that they went to the planet called Sirius in Canis Major, Canis Minor. They said that there are 3 suns there. Now, of course, our astronomers now just discovered a recent one about 30 years ago, but now I still say through metaphysics there's still a 3rd sun. It's a trinary system. That's debatable too, because they say the binary is the only thing we get. Yet again, we'll have to see if that's true or not. But the same story reads the same, that many went there. Others actually came to Earth, because Earth, they felt, with the kind of consciousness and science they had on Mars, Earth could be very well helped with them coming there again. Mm-hmm. And others say that they went to an entirely different system. Whether any of this is true, or whether all of this is true, it would be, if it did true, that there would always have been Martians that came here to Earth because of the catastrophe that befell Mars. Right. When it disintegrated, part of the disintegration rocks or so sheared off the top of Mars. And Mars would have been shunted, as they call it, broken its vortex bound out of Earth, out of its orbit, had it not been for putting up Phobos and Deimos. One is retrograde, the other is grade. One spins counterclockwise, the other spins clockwise, and this is what now gives stability to the planet Mars, when supposedly this catastrophe happened. It's then also said that when Maldek and Malona disintegrated themselves, one of them had salt water. And that salt water called a deluge is one of the big floods. And then after the flood, when many things came to earth, because earth had nothing but fresh water at that time. It was not a saltwater planet. And this is why they say salt and water would not mix. Now fresh water and salt water wouldn't mix. And at that time, because of the magnetic charge of fresh water and the electrical potential of salt water, the two could mix. You notice now you can begin to mix them, but that's because we've really gotten into a mess here. But at that time then, those creatures that were fragmented in their eggs and cocoon and larvae, they also carried to space, and therefore you had many Martian creatures now that came with the water to Earth that were never on Earth before. And this is where you begin to get creatures in the sea of salt water that are completely different. You had the vicious sharks, you had octopus, you had very voracious type creatures, which normally would not be found on this planet.
Right. And
this is why you now had more docile type of fish and aquarium, aquatic type things that live in the fresh water, and these monsters and things that live in the salt water. I include that because that should be understood now, as the Navy, Department of Navy and other departments now are actually beginning to break up the undersurface, or what they call the bottom of the oceans, and they're killing off creatures. They're killing off the species that were called dolphins. And these, well, that's another thing. And now I'm trying to get, that's kind of digging into that too, because most people don't even cover it. So as long as we're going to get way out in this Cape, let's not exclude any of it. Okay. It's been said that one of the aquatic life forms is very intelligent, very psychic, is the dolphin. And the dolphins, once they understood, since in fact, the dolphins are said are much more psychic than any earthian. And that they also have species, they have families, they are very resolute and very spiritual. If you read the story of dolphins, they've saved many a person from sharks. They've led ships to what they call coral reefs and things like this. They've always been a friend. They play with people, they play with babies. Many people are healed by the high vibrations by swimming with the dolphins, because their field is much higher than ours, and it helps to bring cell structure to resolution and balance. So, of all the creatures in the sea to bother, the Department of Navy, the Japanese government, many others in fishing for salmon and this kind of thing are actually now killing off dolphins by the hundreds. Wow. That's like killing off young gods. It's like killing off another race of people. It is a war. They didn't declare war on us. We still aren't fighting. It's these governments, and usually these governments controlled by the Illuminati, that are doing this injustice. So much so that if you remember roughly around 3 years ago, they were beaching themselves like mad. Right. Sperm whales were beaching themselves, dolphins were beaching themselves, and they couldn't understand. Right. Why would these crazy dolphins beach themselves? Right. Well, if you're down there digging in your backyard, constantly drilling, you're trying to sleep, sending out these sonar things, trying to find other submarines, putting down their poisons and air guns down there, in your habitat, in your home, you get angry too. And pretty soon, you just go insane. If you're a spiritual person, rather than attacking all the people, you say, I'm just going to kill myself. I'm going to get away from this. They were being driven mad.
Yeah,
but
they putting telephone lines in the water too.
Oh, they're
digging for oil also.
Well, they're talking about transatlantic cables and stuff. That's old hat. They're really using satellites now. Yeah. Plus, they've also found some blue pyramids down there that these different companies are using, and they didn't even build them. Wow. Out in the Pacific Ocean, you got 3 blue pyramids, 400 feet tall, just like the one there in Giza, and some up to 650 feet tall. They're not using that transatlantic cable. That's the foolishness they did when during World War II. Yeah. But no, they're using actually their cable things now. They're using these blue pyramids and all like that. But let me kind of get on with it to finish this little dolphin story. So, as now the dolphins are being destroyed, they were like the high-frequency angels of the ocean. They kept these other species that were from Mars and all down where they belong, because they set up a sound psychic barrier. Now, when you kill them off, it's just like killing off your security guards. Right. It's just like killing off your protectors. They were the ones that befriended people. And now, as our planet is going from a higher dimension, these other creatures that did live on Mars, and on Maldek and places like this, they now are being made to have to do the same thing. They've either got to quicken their spirits or not. I state this, and I hope for sure that I'm wrong. You're going to start seeing things come out of the ocean that you don't want to believe. You're going to see things happening on the planet that you don't want to believe, because these creatures that used to be able to stay inside are now being driven outside, because here's the whole key. This is what they're not telling you at all. Our Earth is said to have an inner sun. That inner sun is what has been called the smoky god.
Right.
It's been called Itadorfa. It's been called by many things. It's a central sun that's inside the earth, and instead of it being a molten lava, and so the molten lavas are in the cave worlds, and it's said to be 7. But the 7th one is actually supposed to be a hanging type of a consciousness there that is called the soul of earth.
Wow.
As this earth now works on magnetic frequency, and this is what these new suns are giving, it's quickening that, and the vibrations from the outer sun, and we now have 2. Binary star sun system. I know it gets better and better.
Right.
But it's been said since about the middle of 2003, no, the end of 2003, the middle of 2004, they have photographed, and we have photographs of it too. It's from around from Italy, from Spain, in the United States, the West Coast. We have 2 suns. And the second sun has such a frequency that it's sending out a magnetic eminence. Well, magnetism works well with the spiritual body, it works well with the pineal gland, and this is why when you get a lot of magnetism, your headaches can go away, your iron-carrying blood can heal faster, because magnets are a higher propensity. And I got to state this too, as we set this whole scenario. There are 3 types of energy that a planet under the sun can utilize according to metaphysical principles. One is called org, and org stands for the term we're using: original, organic, orgasm, organism. It means it has a mind vibration close to the Creator's mind. It is from the Creator. It is nothing that's just made in happenstance. It is merely that energy. Second can use is magnetic energy. And of course, in a magnet you have 2 poles, north, south, and null. The 2 poles, north and south, one is draws, one repels, and the one in between is like a null zone. That's why in a magnetic field is a safe place which no quality can use. This is what they use for many of these spaceships and all too. And then there's a third energy, the lowest that you can get in the state of anything alive, and that is electricity. And unfortunately, that's what we've been using thanks to the Dracons and the Illuminati on this planet, electricity. And electricity being the lowest form of energy, they now have one even lower form than that, extra low frequency. And that's what are called elf waves. I have a tape out called Elves, Not Elves, Are Killing Me.
Right.
People worry about gremlins and trolls and goblins and elves, but it's the elf waves, these extra low frequency propagations of the magnetic field that are causing all the harm that I started this tape off with the cell phones and these towers that you see everywhere. They got them up everywhere, all over the earth, because the Illuminati are trying to change the ascension to the magnetism and orb that the earth can go through to stay down here where we were, so we can be dumbed down, comatose, brainwashed, inoculated, vaccinated, and encrypted, any 2 of which make you useless to ascending planet. So they know exactly what they're doing. The battle is for the consciousness of man to awaken, for the consciousness of human to understand that they are already hybrids, and this day that the biggest enemy is now being gotten rid of. Do we want to stay with them, or do we want to go to the ascension cycle as the Creator says? Most Christians, most what they call Jewish, most people who are Islamic and all want to go to higher consciousness. But to go to higher consciousness, and you're not going to do it in the heavens, you're going to have to do it on a planet, then you're going to have to change with the frequency of the planet, or you will be going to a heaven and hell because you won't be able to stay in these physical bodies. And since we love our physical bodies, we're either going to have to clean up our acts, have those bodies deteriorate, try someplace else. But those who are sin now, you're noticing they're changing the diet, they're trying to lose weight, they're trying to clean up the colon, they're cleaning out the colon, they're trying to get into all these things because inwardly we know we can do better. And if we don't do what our soul tells us to do, we lose that soul to the consciousness of the Creator, and we start all over again. So I say we're in a heck of a time.
Right.
I think it's a wonderful time, and I think if we can begin to hear our voice inside and our God self inside, and stop listening to these mad scientists and those who would kill you anyway, and start doing what we know we should do, we might get a lot of help. Without it, I say the Creator better help us, because if there is a God, the Creator better take over and help us from some of these gods who I don't think we want to serve. And these people we worship as gods all over the place, we better wake up and understand that they are not consciousness. They don't have even the consciousness of anybody with melanin that's using it correctly, and hope that there is a Creator that will help us out of it.
Right.
So covered a lot, but hopefully that didn't leave too much, but if it did, I'm sure you guys will get us into talking about it.
Right, okay. Well, you did cover a whole lot. Did we want to get some questions?
Q&A with the doctor.
Q&A for Dr. Delbert Blair?
Questions, Mr. Moore, sir?
I wanted to ask a question that, I don't know if you said anything about that. Where did man come from?
Where does man come from?
Yeah, where did man come from?
Well, man is said, well, we have man, we have human, we have woman. Man is said to be descended from God. God are said to be these advanced people, or people like them who are very more advanced than where we are at this time. Mankind is another. Mankind is like a clone, or like a machine, as they're now trying to introduce machines back into the human race. Human, and many of the brothers and sisters, of course, when people who are white see this film, people who are black see this film, the brothers and sisters say that hue is H-U-E. That's not what it means at all.
Right.
Human is hybrid man. It's a man that has been mixed, it's God man that has been mixed with all these other animals through Dulce, through many of the things that have gone into Pine Gap, places like this, Montauk Point, where they are fearlessly going against the Creator and making what they want. So man is descended from God. Man is the original person that was supposed to be inhabited of earth. Human is animal man. Genetically modified people, and I have pictures of people that have been made into crocodiles, spiders, you name it again, because these mad scientists like this movie, The Island of Dr. Moreau, anything you can think of, you do. Well, if you do that, you're really a devil in a sense, because you're now not using any judgment and spirituality, because you can do it. Everything you can do, you're not supposed to do unless you pay for it again. So that would be it. And of course, womb man is a man with womb, and that's another story I get into. I have a whole tape on man, womb man, and children. And of course, there's another thing too. We're calling many of our children kids. And kid is a baby goat, and that serves the people who worship the Baphomet, the goat god. So again, it's a much difference between a child, and to show how much ideological consciousness they're using on us and brain warping, we're now having doctors and scientists and supposedly intelligent people calling our children kids. You do not birth kids, you birth children. But again, to show exercise control, this is it. So that's the way I understand where it's being corrected.
Any other questions you want to ask Dr. Blair?
Other questions, we talked about the inner earth, and a couple questions didn't get added that I know some of the folks at home might be wondering. The two inner cities of the Middle Earth. Many throw out the name Agartha and Shambhala. If you would, Doctor.
Well, you know, there's a very interesting thing. There's a movie that plays up again from a book by a person by the name of Tolkien, and they talk about Middle Earth. Then there are many people who talk about it. You say Shambhala. There's some say Agarthi, some say Agartha, some say one is blasphemous, that you're actually showing the ignorance, and so. But it's said there is a lot of story about the 7 cities of gold, which are said to be the inner cities, that there are 7 basic ones. Teloshan being one. I'm not permitted this time to mention the others because the order that I learned from it state, I took like oath I would not go into that. But I simply say there are many books. Itadorfa being one. The Coming Race by Bulwer Lytton, which does name them, and whether or not the names are correct or not, it stated that there are 7 cities there where high degrees of consciousness can dwell. And it's been said that many times as they're coming to a precipice like we're coming to in the past, when certain civilizations were destroyed, many of them were picked up by these people that live inside the earth and saved alive, okay? And that from time to time, since they are much more advanced than we are, having come from outer space and having been descendants from these original gods, they're always observing us. And so some of the things we see are not extraterrestrial, they're interterrestrial. Some of these things are not from alien planets, they were coming right from our Earth. Right. In fact, some of the ships you see, they obviously could not go too far in outer space, so they must be something that can do to breathe with oxygen and so like that. So this is one of the so-called the biggest secrets. They had one biggest secret that came out before about the secret of higher consciousness. Well, secret consciousness is one. But the biggest secret is that there's life forms inside the Earth, and not only is there life forms inside the Earth, the governments of the world have been digging now for years to enhance some of these tunnels and some of these cities where the ancients dwelled, and they now have installations down there. They also now have places that they want to run and hide, like this new movie 2012 said. Right. When this catastrophe hit, they can go deep inside the earth and ride out the storm. So yes, there's said to be 7 inner cities, not just 7 cities, there's 7 cities inside the hollow of earth, but then also, you must keep in mind, there are supposed to be the cave worlds. And there's more living space inside the earth than it is outside. Outside the earth, unless you're aquatic, you have 3/4 water, then you have land masses. But inside the earth, you have 6 different layers, including the hollow 7, where you can live. Right. The mean temperature is 60 degrees, and once you start getting back this foolish notion of there being molten lava, that only exists on the first 2 levels. If you look at these daggone volcanoes and all, they don't go deep inside the earth, they have a shallow base. And this is why they have the calderas. But once you get past those that have calderas, and we have a map showing one of the ancient ones, the Pee Wee Reese maps, some maps that Tuareg people in Africa used to have, the Dogons had, when they heard the truth, since the truth, of course, with the invention of these Macedonians and stuff like this, which we can get into. Anyway, I could just go on and on with that. I simply say, hopefully that was pretty much your answer, that there are livable spaces inside the earth. Some are what they call tunnel and cave cities, and some are actually built in a hollow of earth around the central sun.
Will suffice, Dr. Blair. One other question I know some may be curious about. There's been a debate, if you could touch on, if appropriate at the time, our artificial satellite and its origins, that being the lunar, the moon.
Oh, wow. Well, you guys are really not playing tonight, are you? Well, whoever sees this tape, they're going to say, well, I saw a comedy one night and they had it there from a combination. Or they're going to say, boy, they got some very interesting people there about, maybe we ought to come look you up. I think the latter should be the case.
Right.
Okay, let's just put it like this again. Give me your question again, because I'm getting diverted from something else that's coming to my mind. Give me your question again now.
The question was about our artificial satellite. Why we should get conscious mind thinkings. Why that in other planets in our solar system it appears to be revolving, and we have what's I know, and I was a big Star Wars fan as a child, a Death Star that's just sitting there still.
Right.
Some challenge the question that there is gravity, that there isn't gravity. I like to know the origin of the lunar moon, and I myself, in theory, and I'm not a well-educated person, I'm just an admirer of truth, if would say that why doesn't it revolve? And it seems to me as something's wrong.
Well, again, education is a matter of consciousness. There are many people who are miseducated that don't know it and still now trying to stop people from getting educated. Because our education system is not the best. You know, we're 29th in the world when it comes to birth and education anyway now. So whatever we're doing isn't so great. And whatever the souls that are turning out here are not too smart. But either way, education has nothing to do with it. It's a matter of consciousness and what do you know within and what can you learn without. That's another long story. It's said that at one time our earth had no moon. Many of the Hopi people, the Cherokee people, many of the Tuareg people, many of the Watusi people, and that's another thing too we can get into, the Watusi, they all have legends of the time when the earth had no moon. The earth moon supposedly is an artificial body. We talk about Nibiru, we talk about the Death Star, and you say the trilogy of Star Wars and Hobbits and go with Middle Earth. But it was said that at one time these Dagon Dracons came in with a moving battle star. And this is where our Darth Vader story of stuff maybe have some truth. And that they actually steered this particular vessel into the Earth boundary to take over the Earth. Because they brought their own battleship, you might as well say, this Death Star, and stopped it. And they began to wreak havoc on the people here. There was a lost continent that is now called a large area in the Pacific, which was called Lemuria. Sometimes referred to as Pan, sometimes referred to as Mu. And on this again were Zapopatakans, which later on were called Olmecs. And these are the people that were Martians that came here that already had seen the destruction on the influence of what these Merkabans, and that's very interesting that you use that term, but these people from Pegasus, which were now called these Dracons, if you would, they'd seen what they'd done before, and they refused to let it happen to Earth again, this time without a fight, because they'd already had their ancestors messed over by them, so they took a stand and said, no, when this came in, Earth needs help. And it is the Creator's will that we help, and so they did. And they had a big battle that raged for years with the Martians and what we now call Olmecian people, fighting these draconic people who came off of this Death Star. And the battle was so intense that they broke the motors that pivoted the moon, so the moon could no longer take off again. And they had many battles. That's one of the reasons for the pock marks on the moon. Not only had they received it as they came through space, but once they got here, they were actually having bombs and things that were being, ray guns and all things like this. They have found on the moon, one other thing too, many people believe, well, that theory can't be because the moon was ejected from the Gulf of Mexico. Impossible. They have found moon rock dating 5.5 years. The Earth is said to be 4.5 years, which means that the moon is older than the Earth.
Billion
so it
years.
can't have been taken from the Earth and still find rock samples up there. They have found so much on the moon that they're reporting, and I get that secret literature. It shows you up there with people's robots' head that look negroid. I even had pictures, it's a very controversial film about the black woman on the moon.
Wow.
About spaceships 3/4 of a mile long up there, 1.5 billion years old, and the governments know this. It is that the people not being able to get hold of this kind of teaching, having to go with 9 to 5, pay electric bills, pay income taxes and taxes they never should have to pay. They don't have time for the research. I've been blessed with time for the research, and being at this such a long time, have people that send me information. But that's the overall story for it, and that battle grounded the moon. And there's another very interesting thing too. No matter how big the crater, whether you go to Mare Crisium, Aristarchus, Tycho, which is the biggest crater on the southern exposure of the moon, all the craters there do not go past 3.5 miles. And it's been asked, if you have a small meteor that hits with the impact and nothing stops it, you get a certain depth. But you get a huge boulder or something, maybe 3 or maybe 5 miles wide, it hits. It should go deeper into the moon than it should be otherwise. None of those craters go past 3.5 miles, which leads up to the story that the ancients had, that the moon has a hull. And that hull is impervious to most things that are found. This is why they could come through space. And even though you hit it, you hit that pragmatic hull where the whole ship is grounded to, and where supposedly the creatures that lived on the moon and the driving mechanism of the moon is found. So there's a lot of story about the moon. You know, about 6 weeks ago they shot, supposedly wanted to blow up something on the moon. But if you notice, none of the television sets shows you the actual impact. You had to guess at the impact. All of them suddenly went out. So you don't know whether they actually did detonate anything there. But the point was, why would they draw so much attention to the moon? I always say, if they tell you to look up, look down. Right. Whatever they tell you, if you don't know what to do, look away. Something must have been happening at that time to get your attention away. But why make it to the moon? Probably because there is something that these draconic people or these forces want you to start thinking about the moon. Or that they were trying to hide something else that was going on in the moon. But you never saw the impact. They told you about the impact. Right. But everybody was looking at the moon. You even had a president having children come to the White House looking at telescopes, Right. All this to give attention to the moon. So obviously there must be something happening on the moon. Right. Either the good guys are trying to draw your attention to it, or the bad guys are trying to divert from something else that's going on here. There's so much negative going on here. It could be for the swine flu shots. It could be another war started. Who knows again. So pretty much that's my understanding of the moon and the people that battle with it and the kind of things that were done from it and all like that. I used to have a picture that's said to be a moon man, but that picture was in a book, I forget it now, because you might be able to still dig that up on UCAP or something like that. But anyway, this is the whole story about the moon, its inhabitants, and what happened to. Oh, and the reason why you say why it only shows one face, because it's not a natural orbiting satellite. That's right. It doesn't revolve. It just goes around in orbit because it can't move, and that's why, because it's not a natural thing. It's not a natural moon to the Earth. That's right.
Well, we thank you, Dr. Blair, on behalf of Macabre Nation.
You have one more question.
Okay.
Maybe a couple. Maybe a couple. But go ahead, ask your question, son.
One more question. What kind of technology is there in the inner Earth, and how advanced is it compared to the surface?
You mean the people who have intelligence inside the Earth is so what kind of technology?
Yeah.
Hard to know, hard to say. Many of the so-called UFOs that are seen seem to be coming out of the orbit of the poles, which would mean if there's an opening at the pole, that would be the natural way for them to come out. If they're coming out through the cave worlds, it's got to be a pretty big cave where they got to come up out of the ocean. Many are seen coming up out of the ocean. So it might be that those are the ones that are not from outer space, but from inner space. The technology obviously would let them be both aquatic, as well as going into the medium we call oxygen or the air itself. The technology in many of these UFOs, there seem as big bright lights, and there's a field of force around them. Others seem to be revolving and they're flashing, and so they have a magnetic field. I think the ones with a magnetic field may be the ones that come from other planets. I think the ones that have a big bright light are simply having an electrical field and they couldn't go to other places because they're not driving with magnetism, and they may be the ones from the inside again. There was also a lot of stories about the German Third Reich under Hitler, the Reichstag, that there's German scientists there had advanced to a point that they had captured or reconsidered using drill force, and that there was a fleet of submarines that came out of Germany near the end of World War II that came into what they call Rainbow City and Ultima Thule there, that actually had been in contact with the inner gods. That's one of the things they say about Hitler, that he said he was in charge or he was in contact with the gods of the underworld, and they were fierce and they were horrible. And of course, there's a lot of things about that too. But whether or not any of that is true, whether or not there isn't, many sightings are seen of UFOs going into water, UFOs coming out of the polar areas again. And it's also interesting too that recently there was they made a big to-do about some guy who was getting money from rich people to take a tour up into the South Pole, or what they call Hyperborea, it used to be called, to see if there was an inner Earth thing. They got real quiet. They had raised enough money. They would use supposedly only icebreaker. It was from Russia. Russia was going to lease to them or something. Haven't heard too much about it. But the government has been known to have outposts in what they call Antarctica. They've got bases up there in Antarctica, and always a lot of things are being seen. I will say this. The theory under metaphysics is that there is a city of plastic and glass up there, which has been covered over and looks like it's ice, but it's not. And that this area there, which has been called Ultima Thule and been called Rainbow City and much, is an area there where the ancients had built some of these cities at a time when it was not snow and ice up there, at a time when they had a magnetic shift of Earth, and this is when it became our polar region, and that magnetic shift may soon come again. And I think that last magnetic shift will be what will send us into the fifth dimension, and it's one of the things that was going to kill a lot of people, because when you get a magnetic shift is one thing, when you get a polar shift is nothing. But a magnetic shift will shift everything in our body to a new consciousness and new thing. So this is the way I understand it to be. There was one other question.
No other questions. On behalf of myself, Macabre Nation, we're grateful, we're honored and privileged.
Thank you, Dr. Blair.
We hope for the rest of the viewing audience that they can ask questions, raise consciousness. Don't take your word, our word, and we're grateful, and we continue to strive to raise consciousness.
Well, I thank you again, and let me say thank you for having me here. And once more, if any of the people there want to get the tape, they can contact you. If any of the people want to contact me again for lectures or topics like this, we have a website. It's okay to give it?
Yes, yes.
The website is www. They have to type in the first, metacenter.com. That's THEMETACENTER. Landline, if you want to phone us, is 708-422-6688. I want to thank all you brothers and sisters for having me here. May the Creator bless us all.
Thank you.